Welcome everyone to another exciting AFBE event. My name is Samuel. I hope everyone had a fantastic bank holiday, really. I didn't do much myself. I was just sat on the sofa watching a lot of Nollywood movies. But yeah, another event highly requested for by a lot of people after a fantastic event we had in March. Just to go through the agenda today. 1 second, it's being slow. Okay. So basically what we've done is put together this small amount of time really to boost people's confidence when it comes to chartership and answer any uncertainty when it comes to any questions regarding the competency, and also clarity upon confusion, and also unlocking people's potential to get into the next step in the career really. So what we're doing right now is introduction up to 5:10, and from there on we have a panelist discussion, and then we have some Q&As. Presentations is lagging. Okay, what do we need from everyone? You're probably going to be getting a lot of advice today from different people around chartership, and one thing I would definitely recommend to people is implementation. So take away, write some notes, ask questions, feel comfortable to ask questions from different panelists, and basically then go back and implement it, because it is time for people to get chartered, and you're here for the right reason. Just to introduce people to what AFBE do. AFBE basically is an organization that raises awareness when it comes to diversity for a range of events. We have the popular transition event, which is set in form of a mock assessment center, getting students the real life scenarios for reviewing the CVs to getting interviewed by industry professionals. We also have our Making Engineering Art program, which educate kids from primary and secondary school kids, and basically getting them an insight of what engineering is about. We also have a mentoring, our roundtable, real projects, and research and consultancy. So we have all this fantastic event. If you would like to get involved with, we'll have a conversation later on at the end of the podcast. The webinar. Some of our sponsors actually doing a lot of good jobs with us include the WSP, IET, IMEC, ICE, and so on and so forth. A lot of this organization do provide us some positive input into making a lot of our events possible, really. So thank you to our sponsors again. On the topic of professional registration, we'll describe what professional registration is. So it's basically an award given to an engineering professional to show a high level of competence when it comes to engineering. It does have its benefits to it, such as some people might say money. It also gives you professional it gives you that recognition by your peers, and also you could take it to the next level of your career really. So it does have its pros, shall I say. I can't really think of any cons. So next slide. Sorry, I'm just getting a lot of names popping up at the bottom and it's laying this thing lag. Okay, so one of the biggest myths I normally get people saying. Sorry, can people mute the call, please, when they enter the call?
Oh, we will. Chalo, okay, love
Sorry about this. 1 second. Okay. Sorry about that. I'll just advise people really on if you go to any webinar, just try your best to mute the calls, please, just to respect the other people on there. So there's always different discussions regarding friendly competition or friendly banter, should we say, regarding one institution better than the other. And I totally disagree. As a matter of fact, there's currently 40 institutions registered with the Engineering Council, and all this are equally respected. So all this talks around one is more tricky than the other. It doesn't matter. As long as the Engineering Council gives you that stamp of authority, they have the level of respect altogether. So in terms of the panelist, I'll let Sadiq introduce himself. Sadiq is a chartered engineer with the ICE. Sadiq, if you just kindly introduce yourself, please.
Hello everyone, my name is Sadiq Raji. I work for WSP currently. I work as a project manager / engineering manager. I'm chartered with the ICE chartered last year in December, and it took me 4 years of experience to get me to chartership level, and yeah, it's definitely something which has been sort of useful, and now I'm kind of moving into the next stage of my career. So
Thanks very much. Welcome, Sadiq. Next, Dr. Ozak.
Hi, I'm Ozak, and I am a technical lead, smart buildings at BRE. BRE stands for the Building Research Establishment. I've been a member of the IET since I was a student. That's when I started, and then became a member in 2011, and went on to get chartered in 2019 last year. Yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
I do. Thanks very much. Yasmin.
Hi everyone, I'm Yasmin Ali. I'm a chemical engineer. I graduated in 2010 with a master's degree and joined a graduate scheme with IEng. I now work for the government's energy department, and I applied for chartership in 2015 through the IEng and got that in 2016. And I will leave it there for now.
Thanks very much, Yasmin. And Roshni.
Hi everyone, I'm Roshni Vijay-Sekara. I studied mechanical engineering at the University of Sheffield. I graduated in 2012, and I've been working in the fire engineering industry since then. And yeah, and I became chartered with the IEng last year.
Thanks very much. Okay, just to paint the picture for everyone, there's always a word flown around CEng and Chartership. It's basically a list of competency that's been created by the Engineering Council. The first engineering competence is the knowledge and understanding. The second one being B, which is design, development, and process of systems and services. C is more of the leadership style, so responsibility and management. D being communication and interpersonal skills, which is what I try to do right now. I like to think I'm doing anyway. And E is professional commitment. So yeah, and obviously in terms of assessing yourself, they normally advise people to start looking at chartership when they get to level 3. So when you're actually a practitioner and you've been doing it and you're not being supervised. And I know we do, regardless of what stage you're in, you always get supervised, but they like when people are more hands-on and basically need less supervision, really. So in terms of the assessment process, before we get to the panelist discussion, I'll just break it down really. You have 2 options. So you could either go through the recognized qualification route, or you could go for the individual assessment route. And now, so just to paint the picture for the assessment qualification route, this is basically you would need a accredited integrated master's or a BEng and an MSc combined together. And if you're looking for the individual assessment route, you'll probably be asked to provide some sort of report to share your experience with the institute. So basically, they could assess you that way. So those are the 2 ways of getting chartered. So now, my first question, I'll start with you, Yasmin, with the IEng. In terms of getting a mentor and who could support your application, and also what type of time of the year could you actually get chartered? Can you just elaborate with us regarding the IEng?
Yeah, sure. So I had a mentor through work. So it depends on the organisation that you work for and whether they support chartership. They may provide you with a mentor if you ask. If not, you can get in touch with your local IEng group and ask them if they can mentor you. So I did have some help from people in the London group from the IEng as well. And you can ask pretty much any chemical engineer who's more senior, who you come across at work or through your professional developments to help you out with this stuff. Most people are quite happy to support. And as far as I know, you can apply any time of the year. There's no set time that you have to submit your application.
Okay. Oh, thanks very much. Roshni, in terms of the IEng, can you sort of elaborate with us as well?
Yeah, so the IEng have this scheme called the MPDS scheme, and for the scheme you would need a mentor. So you've got some companies are accredited with the scheme, and so they would have to provide a mentor for you. But if so that's what I did. I used to work at ACOM, and ACOM gave me a mentor. But yeah, as Yasmin said, similarly, you can just get in touch with the institution, and if you don't have a mentor, and they will help provide you a mentor. Your mentor doesn't have to be an IMechE member. As long as they are a chartered engineer, they can support your application. Regarding the time of year you can apply, you can apply anytime. I think they have reviews every 3 months, something like that. So you might be waiting a month to hear back, or you might be waiting 3 months, but you can apply whenever you're ready.
Thanks very much. And Sadiq, in terms of the ICE, how do you take it forward for in terms of sponsors?
Okay, so in terms of getting a mentor, I think as the other two panelists have echoed, it can come through sort of a number of different avenues. If you mentioned and said your intention is to become chartered, normally you can speak to somebody within your business or anyone who knows at chartership level, usually somebody who's chartered within the industry or within the organization you're trying to get chartered with. And then from there, you can now sort of usually discuss what the application process is. So with ICE, the application process is in kind of in 2 phases.
So, yeah, sorry, Sadiq, before you carry on, it's a bit low on your side.
Hello?
Yeah.
Clear now? Okay,
Yeah, perfect.
So in terms of getting, applying, before you'd apply, you would have already done your training scheme. And the training scheme, you would have had to have a training contract. Okay, let me just use my example. For me, I had a training contract. I know there is another way to sort of apply as well, but you have a training contract with this company you work with. That is where the competencies sit within. And once that has been signed off by a number of people, so that's first of all by your mentor, who will act as your supervisor. Act as your supervisor during the process. Then it's then also signed off by a SCE, and then the MD. So the MD is sort of a regional sort of supervisor who is within the ICE, who signs off everything. Once all that is done, and I just quickly skimmed over it.
Yeah.
Once all that's done, then you can apply. And you can apply at any time, but you are applying for 2 different slots within the year. It's the spring, which is...
sorry for breaking you, Sadiq. People are still sort of saying it's sort of odd. I don't know if you could... Yeah, if you maybe just get a little bit closer.
Yeah, I'll just move a bit closer.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so all of the stuff I just said, which is a quick skim of it, I'm sure we'll go into more details.
Yeah.
Sort of sets you up to apply for 2 different windows. There's 2 windows available. There's one in the spring, which is normally March, April. People sit their professional reviews, and then the autumn one, which is generally between September. It sits between September, because I did mine in September.
So from the ICE, it's March or September for application date?
No, what it is your application would have had to have been before then. However, you'll be applying to do your reviews at those 2 dates.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks very much. And Ozak, in terms of the IET.
Yeah, so for me, I'll just use myself as an example. At the time when I was applying, I was working for a company called Condor, and they offer you a mentor because they're part of the IET accredited scheme. Their graduate program is accredited by the IET and a few other institutions. So yeah, they do appoint a mentor for you. But I know of people who couldn't, their companies may not necessarily support that. And the IET does offer mentors. It's on their website. If you go there, you could actually apply for a mentor and have one appointed to you. I think it's better now because it's all digital anyway, so you're not really like narrowed down by your location. You could have a mentor from any part of the country now with lockdown and everything else happening. Who can support your application? Ideally, your line manager would be one of your supporters, because it needs to be somebody who is very familiar with the current stuff you're working on as well. But then for me, so I had 3 supporters. I think you only need a minimum of, is it 2 or 1?
Two from IT. Yeah.
Yeah, so I used my line manager, and he was one of my supporters. And my other supporter was my mentor. So my mentor that was appointed to me by the company. And the last one was my PhD supervisor, because I came from a research background and I was using the research as evidence of some of the competencies in competency A particularly. What time of the year can you apply? You can apply any time with the IIT, and they turn it around quite quickly as well for most people. So yeah, at any time, there's no restriction on when you can submit an application.
Oh, thanks very much. So just to sum that up, from my understanding, you could either get a mentor for your organization, your company, or you could
Yes.
actually reach out to your institute to basically get a mentor from there.
Yes.
Okay, thanks very much. So now, paint a picture. Young Samuel's basically going a mentor. Now on to the next stage, which is, I'm guessing, actually the application itself. So starting with you again, Ozak, can you just paint the picture with the IET from the application stage all the way to the day you become successful as a chartered engineer?
Yeah, so the IET have something called the initial professional development is on their careers. They have a portal called Careers Manager, and I quite recommend it. It was how I started my journey and documenting my process to chartership. So a couple of 2 years before I wanted to apply, I got into the routine of, should I say, documenting my progress. It's a good way to track how you're developing your skills, and also to structure which skills you would need to, which skills you still have gaps in to be able to achieve chartership. So that really helped me, my mentor and I, to work carefully together and know the sorts of projects I needed to almost ask to work on so that I could take the other competencies where I lacked. So I recommend that you could check on the IIT's website. It's called Career Manager. So I started with that, and then there's an initial, you could submit an initial application which gets reviewed, and they will tell you how far off you are or how close you are. So I think I did one, and they're like, you're good as ready to go for it. So I just applied online. So online, did the application form. You talk about your career history. It's no more than 10 pages, including your supporter statements that goes with your application. So if you use the portal, you enter your own details for each of your career history, basically. I think you're allowed to do 2 to 3 projects per career, history for the past 5 years. I think it's what anything past 5 years, you just list it. You don't have to go into detail because it's not as relevant as the newer stuff you would do in the 5 years to your chartership. So yeah, all your achievements, whether it's volunteering, etc., you give examples and how you meet each of the competencies in the application form. And that gets sent off along with your supporter statement. As part of the application, you also have to do an organization chart. You have to submit that shows where you sit within your company. And the other document you have to submit as well is your development action plan. So what do you plan to do in the short term, which is like a year from submitting, what you plan to do in 2 years' time, and what you plan to do in 5 years' time. So it gets you to really think about it. So after I submitted the application online, you get a waiting period where it's reviewed and assessed. Something I should mention is the fees as well. Hopefully your employer covers the fees because it's not cheap. But if they don't, yeah, really consider that, because it's an ongoing cost that you're going to be paying from the moment you're chartered till whenever you decide not to pay again. So it's something to really think about. After the application process, so online you submit and it gets reviewed. If there are any comments by the first team, it gets sent back to you before it actually goes to the reviewers. So I didn't have any, so it went straight through to the reviewers. But for me, I changed jobs in between, so that kind of delayed things slightly. But if I didn't change jobs, it's a straightforward process. So I had to resubmit my organization chart because that has changed from when I submitted. After that, you go straight to, so application, it goes straight to the review. Once it passes the review, you're invited for an interview. The interview is just a stage to check that you're the person who's actually done all the work you've said in your application form. So it's very important that you don't talk about things you're not familiar with in your application form, because that review process is to assess everything you've submitted in your application. it's a 10 to 15-minute presentation, and then it's questions after that. So it takes a full hour. And then you basically get a decision later on after that particular interview, whether you've been successful or not. Ideally, like depending on if there are no issues or anything, it should take at least 8 to 12 weeks, I would say. And it could take longer if you have other issues. And some people have had it shorter, where it's just a month. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's how that was
to sum up.
the IIT.
And just before we move on to Sadiq, I know you've got a PhD as well. Did that basically help your application in any way? And could you have actually gone for the CEng while actually studying a PhD?
Yeah, you could. So I get that question quite often about research. So yeah, you do have researchers who they haven't worked in industry. Their entire career has been research, and they've stayed at university. But yes, you can, because like you showed the competencies A, B, C, and D. So A is about contribution to new knowledge. So in research, you will be contributing to new knowledge through the various works you'll be doing. And B is application of the application to practice. So most of the stuff you're outputting for research should be applicable in industry. And if you're able to demonstrate how you're applying that, either in your teaching at the university or in your research, your further research at the university or research body you work for. And the rest is leadership, C. So in research, you just need to demonstrate that you are managing people, or you are responsible for the development of others. So like students, for example, how you manage research budgets as well is quite important. And how you supervise various parts of your research. And then interpersonal skills, which I think a lot of people in research would score really high on, because you present at conferences for your work, and you probably give a lot of lectures and stuff like that. And that's kind of what you write, quite a lot of reports and papers, which is part of your interpersonal skills. And then the last one is around standards and ethics. So there's so much research, and research has one of the biggest ethics, should I say, standards or codes of conduct out there. And so yeah, I say certainly if it's important to do that initial assessment, which you mentioned earlier on, Samuel, and determine where you are, if you're a practitioner or not. If you are not, then it helps you guide what you need to be doing to fill in the gaps in your competence. But certainly you don't have to be working in industry to pursue chartership.
Thanks very much. That was nicely said. So now moving on to Sadiq with the ICE, can you paint the picture for us as well, your story?
Yeah, I'll give you my story. Okay, the process starts off. First of all, obviously you've made your intention. You want to become chartered. You've got a mentor. You register onto the ICE. This costs some money to register. My company is I work for WSP, and they are an accredited company and to do training schemes. So you start off with the training scheme. The training scheme normally it spans for it spanned for 4 years, but it could be less and it could be a bit longer, just depending on how your experience is and how you get on with sort of writing sort of some of the evidence that you need to put in there. So as part of the training scheme, you have obviously the competencies, and the competencies need to be met with your different experiences. These are sort of documented and sort of put into the 9 sort of objectives that you have. As I listed them, to pull them up, but there's 9 objectives, which is basically the 5 competencies broken down into sort of further detail, and those competencies are then sort of evidences placed against them and reviewed by your mentor. And once they have been reviewed and they have maybe given you comments or they've given you some things to review, you go and update it, and then you put it in, and then they will sign it off. So once they've signed it off, up to ability level, because it's knowledge, ability, and the last one. There's one more. There's 3 different stages. I may be ticking off a competency when I first started within the company, but I may not necessarily have the ability to teach that or to explain it. I may not know what it is. So there's the information, having the information, and having the ability, and then the knowledge is you now being able to use that information and teach others how to apply it. So once you've ticked off to that level on each of the different competencies, then you are signed off by your mentor, and your mentor is the one who will now say, okay, I think you're at a point where you can now speak to the MDO. The MDO, as I said earlier, is the well, no, sorry, before the MDO, there's somebody else. You've got the SC. That's the SC normally, or for me, sat within the company. He's a senior charter engineer who kind of reviews what your mentor has basically signed off on. Once they've signed off on it, then which will be in the form of a meeting where he reviews sort of the different sort of evidence you've displayed, and also talk to you about your IPD, your CPD. Your CPD is your continuous professional development, how you're getting on with that. And in these meetings, you'll generally have presented some information to him before that meeting for him to review, and he needs to have these meetings with you 3 times before you can actually sign off your training contract, which is what you're sort of adding this evidence to. You'll do that 3 times at least, and it can be more, but at least it needs to be a minimum of 3 times. Once those are done, then it is now passed on, your application is passed on to your training scheme, passed on to your MDO to sign. And this is normally in the format of a meeting you'll have with him. Most MDOs will come to a company where they've got a company which has got accreditation, just to check in, see how the people are doing within the business that want to now join the institute. And then it gives an opportunity for you to set up a meeting to kind of discuss it. It's in the format of something which is supposed to be a chat, but it's not really an interview. It's supposed to be casual, but actually you will be asked questions to show that the information you've written as evidence is true and you actually understand it. It's kind of like a pre-assessment. And
before the briefing.
Yeah, so there's a kind of like a pre-qualifier just to confirm that you're actually at the level to apply. And it is a big thing to actually sign off all of your training scheme and all the evidence and have it there. So that is something to actually be very proud of. Because for me, that was probably the bulk of the work, getting all that information collated into a nice, sort of clear, concise bit of evidence that you can show to your MDO to say that you've got all the experience you need, you've got the variety of experience you need, and now you're ready to go and apply. So once he signs it off, then depending on the time of year, because you may sign off in June, and obviously that would mean the next one would be in September. That would be the next opportunity to do your professional review. So from that June point, you would need to prepare your application, which does take time, get it signed off. You need to get a number of things before that. So once you decided when you want to do your application and you want to hand it in, you need to get 3 sponsors. So normally for me, my sponsors were my mentor, an engineer, chartered engineer, and they all have to be chartered, not necessarily with ICE. Mine was my mentor and a senior engineer I worked with, and then also another senior engineer that I was that could also sponsor me, and they were happy to. So each of your sponsors will write a statement, they'll assess where you are in relation to all the competencies, and that will be submitted, and you won't see that. So you'd be best to pick people who you know will have a good representation of who you are and can clearly and without bias show an assessment in a way. Convey to the institute your level and that you are at the right standard. So once they've done that, so whilst they're doing that, you'll be preparing your application, and the application is comes in a few pieces. So you have an introductory, it's a précis. You'll do like a 1-page précis, which is basically a very quick summary of kind of all the experience you've had over, I'd say, like the last 4 years in just one page, and it has to be very concise, but also it has to cover all of the different competencies, the nine objectives, and in that the all of the competencies. You've got the actual application itself, which you find on the IC website, and so there's a lot of information on the IC website about how to fill it in and all the essential things you need for that. And then you also need to have get the application paid for. So that's another one conversation you have to have with your company if they're going to sponsor or if you're going to do that yourself. So once you've got all that information sort of gathered, that's the sponsors, your one-page précis, and your application and the money to pay for it. Then you can submit your application. Mind you that submitting the application, depending on when it gets signed off, you need to give yourself enough space between once you're handing in your application and when you actually have your professional review, because the professional review is quite a tasking thing to prepare for, and you need to make sure you've got enough time to prepare for that. So for me, I did mine in June, so I kind of left it. I did it quite close to the time when I actually had to prepare for my review, so I had quite an intense few months leading up to it. So once you've done your application, the next thing will be a 5,000 word report, and this 5,000 word report will basically, in more detail, highlight all the different competencies you've met. I did 3 projects. Normally they advise 2 to 3 projects to highlight all that information, and that is quite an iterative process. You will need to show it to mentors, show it to other people, so that they know what you've written, can help and give you some guidance and tips on how to improve it, because that's the main piece of information your reviewers will actually see about you, and they will assess you against that. So again, make sure that everything you're putting in there is true, you actually understood it, and that you can actually explain it. So this is after you've done your application, you'd be preparing this document. And I did mine in June, so I had 3 months, about 3 months to write this and get it to the standard which I was happy with. Whilst you're also doing that, I decided that to prepare for the professional review, which comes in three different elements. It comes in the element of a 15-minute presentation on any topic that you studied. There's also an interview process where the panelists or the interviewers will ask you a number of questions, and then which is for 45 minutes, and then you have an exam at the end. The exam will be something which you have to prepare for. So back to what I was saying about the report, whilst I was doing the report, I was also attending some classes to sort of help best prepare you on how to write these reports, because they are in a style, and just to write a report may not be enough to sort of meet the criteria they're asking for.
So that'll probably link on to my next question. The next question will be about the interview, so we'll get into that. But cool. I know IC is quite it's like a journey from when you're a baby.
Really long,
thanks very much, though. So Roshni, with the IMEC as well, if you could just briefly paint us the picture of how we start from the application to when you get chartered.
Yeah, so the first thing is get your qualifications checked. So if you say send your education history to the IMEC, they would say what route is for you. And if you need a bit more experience, they'll let you know as well. And then you have 2 options. So if your company's has an accredited graduate scheme, you could do the MPDS route, which is a monitored professional development scheme. And with that, you have to have a mentor. And I liked having a mentor. I started as a CFD engineer, but I wasn't working with other mechanical engineers. So it was nice to have a mechanical engineer kind of being a mentor, so someone outside of my team, but still supporting my development. And with that, you have to submit quarterly reports and an annual report. And then also set goals for each quarter. So that is typically about a 4-year route. And then at the end of 4 years, your mentor would say, oh, I think you're ready for the application. If you don't if you're not part of an accredited scheme, you don't need, and you don't have a mentor, you don't need to have one. If you think you've met the UK, the Engineering Council, UK Spec, the competencies, you can submit your application straight away. So either way, you have to submit an application form. The application form will, one part of it is to write down all of your roles and responsibilities. So basically sell yourself what you've done over your working career. And then you write about, I think it's about 500 words on each competency and how you've achieved it. Then you need 2 sponsors, just to say that I think this person is ready to be a chartered engineer. And you also need to provide goals. So you need to say what your short-term goals are and what your long-term goals are, just to make sure that you know, you've got a plan and you want to be an engineer. So yeah, and that's it for the application process. You don't, yeah, so you don't need a mentor if you don't have one. But I enjoyed it. So
thanks very much. That was nice. So we move into the final part, which is the IEng with Yasmin.
Yeah, so my route was more similar to Roshni than Sadiq. The civil engineering sounds quite convoluted, so for good reasons, I'm sure. But yeah, so with the IEng, and I'll just caveat that I did this 5 years ago, so things have probably moved on since then. And when I did it, it was quite paper-based. So I filled in a form called the competence and commitment, or CEng form, which I think still exists, but it's probably more of an online process now. That's got all of the engineering council things in it that we talked about earlier. Again, as Roshni said, check whether your degree is accredited and that kind of thing, because that might push you down some slightly different routes. So my degree was accredited. I had a mentor at IEng who helped with kind of figuring out what experience I needed. So right from the beginning, when I started working, I was writing down the experience that I'd had and almost starting to fill in the form and identifying where the gaps are. So I would recommend doing that. I know some people who will leave it for 10 years and then go back and try and remember what they've done, and it's quite difficult. You also need somebody to sign off to say that, yes, you have done that work. So if you've left that company, then it can be quite hard to get hold of people. It's good to do it as you go along. Then, you know, submit that form with a CV and all of the signatures. So it's 2 sponsors. And then I think, I can't quite remember, there's 2 more signatures that are needed from 2 other people. That gets reviewed. You might get some feedback, which means that you have to change the form slightly. So I had that. I needed to go back and add a little bit more evidence into some of the sections. And I resubmitted. You then get the interview date and you go and do the interview, which is just the questions and answers about the content of your application to verify that it was really you and that the experience is enough that for your peers to deem you, you know, worthy of chartership. So in my case with the interview, my interviewers were kind of not sure, so they recommended that I have a second interview. So I went through a second interview before being approved and getting chartered. So that whole process for me took, from submitting the application to getting the notification, was about 1.5 years, which is probably longer than usual. But yeah, it can take quite a while. In terms of tips, I would just say, like I said, keep a record and start filling that form in as early as possible. And the trickiest competencies, I think in general, people find the later ones about commitment to the profession and ethics a bit more difficult. And the way to get that experience is probably to get involved with your professional institution, or do things like what Samuel's doing here and getting involved in the engineering community. But yeah, that's that was okay for me because I had done lots of volunteering, and I actually struggled a bit more with some of the elements of the first and second one. But yeah, that's all.
Thanks very much. One thing I must say though about the panelists we've got on today is apart from their day-to-day jobs, they're known for also giving back by helping out a lot of organizations. So I would definitely encourage people to, you know, go out there if it's through different institutes such as the IEng, IET, ICE, and IMEC. You know, if you're a young professional, find a young professionals committee like that's how I actually met Roshni. You know, and just give back and think of ways of evolving outside of your workplace as well. So thanks for you guys for that round. We'll move on to the next question. So now you've passed this stage of submitting your application. You've got that email of Mr. Sadiq or Dr. Ozak. You're ready for the interview. Can you kindly pick, because we're running on time, within 1 or 2 minutes, paint the picture? We'll start with you, Sadiq, on what happens on that day and what kind of questions sort of caught you off guard, if I must say.
I'll be quick with this one. So as I said earlier, it's in 3 stages. You've got the interview and you've got the presentation, which is 15 minutes. I time myself because if you're not done in 15 minutes, then they will tell you to stop. So you pick a topic which you like, it's 15 minutes long, you present it, you practice it, you make sure you're very, very aware of everything that's there. Then the next stage, it will be split up into kind of 2 parts, which will be the interview. So they'll ask you firstly about the stuff which you've presented, and that's why I said it's very important to know exactly what you've written, make sure you understand it, and kind of make sure there's enough questions. You've got enough understanding of what they may potentially ask you. And the second part will just be to tick off any other competencies which are not shown or not clearly shown or presented within your presentation. So that will basically be the second portion, and that's kind of how it was for me. The third part was a written exam, which is 2 hours long. So in that, they'll give you 4 questions, I believe it is. It's 4, no, 2 questions, apologies. It's 2 questions. And of those 2 questions, it will be something based on sort of a combination of the competencies. So they may ask you, okay, why is leadership important in construction? And you'll have to answer, give a very, very a well-rounded response, which kind of ticks off all of the competencies in the answer, just to explain that, because they want to show that in your answer you can see how all of the different competencies are connected and how you can kind of bring out something. That's it. And I think in terms of the questions which they asked, I'm just going back a bit. There will definitely be questions which will try to explain or try to get out of you all of the different competencies and your understanding of them to knowledge level. So that's kind of the structure.
Thanks very much. I think one of the biggest myths I've probably heard was, university, them asking you questions like, what's the circumference of a circle, or, the formulas, or, all this kind of stuff. And we always used to panic and start reading books, not actually knowing what would be asked of us. Thanks very much regarding that. So we go to the IEng next. Yasmin, if you could just paint the picture of what kind of questions someone should be expecting.
Sure, yeah. So my interview was with some people from a company called Johnson Matthey, and I worked for E.ON at the time in oil and gas exploration and production. The questions were basically about the work that I'd done. So all they did was read through my competency and commitment form and then ask me for a bit more detail on the examples that I'd given. I struggled a little bit because we were from different industries, so that's something to watch out for, and watch how you communicate your particular sector. You might both be chemical engineers, but they may be in the water sector and you might be in, I don't know, food or something. So just think about how you're going to communicate your experience in a way that's understandable to someone from another sector.
Thanks very much. I think to follow up on that as well, I had a similar scenario. Being a telecoms engineer myself and in the transportation sector, I got someone from telecoms from BT. which is slightly similar to what we do. And, you know, it's just that understanding, that technical understanding that sort of helped me to get my way through on that beautiful day, shall I say. So we'll move on next to the IET with Ozak.
Yeah. And the IET, I think it's 45 minutes in total that is allocated for your interview. The panel was 3 people, but my day they happen to have a moderator or like an observer. So occasionally the process obviously needs to be revised. So you occasionally get them. You occasionally get people who are overseeing the process to make sure it's free, it's fair. It doesn't happen all the time. It just happened that ahead of mine, they told me that if it's okay with you, there will be an observer in the room. He's not assessing you. He's just watching the judges themselves during the process. So yeah, I had 3 people interview me. They were all from different companies and different sectors within engineering. But they were competent enough, obviously, they were all CEng, to understand what had been written in my application. So it started off with me giving a 15-minute, actually it was 10 to 15-minute presentation. And IT is really particular about time. Keep to the time for that presentation. Don't drag it too long. I think I had like 5 slides in total, from the cover to the last one. And I only talked about 2 projects from my application form. So very high level. And then they asked, and then after the presentation, and because they're technically assessing your ability to present, basically, which is competency C and D, where interpersonal skills, basically. You sit down for questions, and they went through my application form page by page, and they had already marked out things they wanted to ask me on. And so I worked in construction. I still work in construction, but at the time I designed electrical services for buildings, and I had been doing that for 4 years when I applied for it. And the first bit I wrote about was my research. So they asked me about what I did in my PhD. And so I just talked through them through the process and answered the questions as they asked. Some of it was technical, where I've mentioned that on a particular project, I had to size the energy, the maximum demand the building was going to require in terms of energy and apply for. So they ask you questions to make sure that you're the one who wrote those things in your application form and you know what you're talking about. So again, I would say, don't write it if you don't know what you're talking about, because you have to read before your interview and be sure that you'll be able to answer the questions. And then the rest of the questions are around ethics. I was heavily questioned on ethics, and luckily I had prepared. So I've put a link in the comment section from the Royal Academy. They have a guide to help engineers in practice around ethics. So I think it's called Ethics in Practice for Engineers, and it's in the comment section already. But there's also the statement of principle, I think is what it's called, ethical principle, that the Engineering Council has, and I'm going to put that in the chat section in a second. So yeah, just being aware of it, honesty, integrity, what that means, and have examples of when you demonstrated that as well. Yeah, so every question they asked me, I just used the same technique I used in my form, which is the STAR technique. So I'll talk about the situation, the tasks, what I did, action, and result. So something I really had to work on before I submitted my actual application was saying because in engineering, most of the things we do is in teams. So I always say, we did this, we did that. No, you need to be that arrogant person that says, I did this, I did that. If that's not your style, you need to work on that between now and when you plan to submit, because Chartership is about you. It's about what your contribution was to the bigger picture. So you can't be going in there during the interview and saying, we did this. So I just made sure I prepared along those lines. I applied, I delivered, I did this, but not saying I did everything, but just being specific about what I brought to the table for that particular project. Yeah, so after the interview, so the interview lasts 45 minutes. And when they were done with their questions, yeah, I came out feeling confident because I knew I had smashed it. Not that may not be the case for many people, but I don't get that very often, but I came out feeling like, it was almost as if they were like, enough. That's how I felt. I was like, oh, because I also took with me like evidence, so like drawings and stuff. They're like, enough, like, yeah. So I left feeling like, yeah, which is very rare because I never come out feeling like I did it. But 45 minutes, don't waste time on your presentation, like stick to the time that you're allotted. And yeah, just be prepared and say I. It's not we, it's I.
Thanks very much. I remember when I came out of mine, actually, it's like I had no emotion. Nikki rang me. She was like, how did it go? I was like, I don't know. I was just numb. Maybe because it was that big thing that was just ticked
Yeah.
off. That I was like, I don't know. But yeah.
Most people would say they don't know, but it was weird because mine, I came out, I was like, oh, that was it.
All done.
But in this, I had built it up to be this big thing that I
Yeah.
the night before. But
Mm.
yeah, it depends on what you say and how you prepare.
True. Thanks very much. Now we'll move on to the IEng key with Roshni. How is the interview stage like?
Yeah, so I found so it was not what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be quite stressful, but it's actually just a conversation with your peers. And so for us, it was about close to an hour. We had two people interviewing you, and we have an observer as well. And they're not allowed to say anything. They just sit in there to make sure that everything's conducted fairly. And then some interviewers like to go through competence by competence, but for me, they just asked me to talk about a project. So I just spoke about a project that I was confident about and said what I did on that project. And yeah, I would agree. You have to say what you did. That's what they want to know. They don't want to know what your team did, what your roles and responsibilities are. I just spoke about the projects that I wrote about in my application. One thing that they always ask in the interview is, have you read the institution's code of conduct? You always read that before you go and say how you apply it in your profession. The day before my interview, my boss told me, read up about sustainability. They would always ask how you apply sustainability in your job. As a fire engineer, I didn't think that we did that much, but so I had to do a bit of research on that. And they definitely asked that question. At the end of the interview, so once your hour is up, they will say, is there anything else you'd want to say that would help? Luckily, I wrote a list of things that I was proud of, like projects that I was proud of. I had not spoken about it. I also did a lot of volunteering for the institution, which I didn't touch on in my interview, so I could bring that up as well. So yeah, that was it. And it was just like a conversation.
Yeah, it was like your ending was similar to mine as well. I remember the guy looking at me and going, so AFBE, what is that? And here we go. And it was quite exciting, always talking about, what I do for AFBE as well. Thanks very much. So now, just to sum up, if everyone could get a minute on this, what happens with your institution if you, I don't like saying failing, if you were successful and if you weren't successful? We'll start with you, Roshni. Just in some couple of seconds, what happens?
So after my interview, I think I had my interview in early July last year, and I got an email afterwards saying that I was elected a member of the institution. And so yeah, that was quite quick. They don't usually fail you. They very rarely fail you. And something you need to remember at your interview, if you're really stressed, is that they want you to do well. They want to make you a chartered engineer. So, and you have already gone through that process and you've got sponsors saying that you are ready to be a chartered engineer. So I go into your interview with a bit of confidence. But they would just say that you're not ready and just come back with a bit more experience. It's not like a fail, and very rarely would they fail someone. But that doesn't happen because you usually have chartered engineers reviewing your application. So they would say maybe come back in a few months. But other than that,
thanks very much. And Sadiq, we're running out of time. Quickly, if you could just
quickly. If you're successful, you'll find out in about 3 months. I did mine in September. I found out in December. Yes, in December that I passed. You just get a letter come through, basically say, great, you're chartered now. If you're unsuccessful, they'll send you a letter around the same time as well. But what it does mean is that from that point on, you need to, if you are intending on doing it again, you have to kind of time it, because often as I said, there's only 2 other times where you can do an application and set your review. You have to time when you find the information out with when you intend to now do it again. So that's something to think about as well. So if you want to redo it, I need to know ahead of time as well.
Thanks very much. And Yasmin, from the IChemE, what happens?
I guess you could say I was technically unsuccessful a couple of times there because they weren't happy with my form the first time around, but they sent me feedback and I adapted it and sent it in again. And my first interview wasn't, yes, you're in, but then they said to come back for a second interview. So as Roshni said, you don't fail, they just give you feedback and you fill the gaps that you have.
Fantastic. And with the IET as well, Ozak, just a couple of seconds.
Yeah, and if you're successful after I think it was 4 weeks, you get an email saying you have been successful, and then your certificate comes through in the post. You get 1 certificate from the IIT and 1 from the Engineering Council. And if you're unsuccessful, most times before it gets to that stage, you would have had comments back at the initial stage where it was reviewed, and it would have been sent back to you with comments on how you could improve it. I had a friend whose application got sent back, and she, based on, but there'll be feedback, is constructive, it's not just up in the air. So based on the feedback she received, she was able to modify her application and really touch more on certain project examples and then resubmit it. If you're unsuccessful, you could always come back again, and there will be feedback for the process, whether it's from the interview where maybe you didn't pass during the interview or something, but it's very rare and I haven't heard, but if it does happen, it's not the end of the world. I think the worst case is that you lose the fee you paid. So if you apply again, you just have to pay the fee. But before you go again, really make sure you address the things that made it not work the first time. And if you do that, you should be successful with the process as well.
Thanks very much. And I think that's one thing I probably want to emphasize on is a lot of people don't go for it because the thinking of I might fail. But when you actually think about it from that point of view, you don't actually fail. You just get sent back to align some competency and achieve them, and probably bring it back within 6 months to a year. So yeah, that's a note to take on. So final question before we get into just something to mention. The engineering spec from the Engineering Council, there's been some few alignments which is going to take in place starting from December 2021. So I'd advise everyone to look into the 4th edition. Currently, everyone's been following the 3rd edition, but there's been some couple of changes as, for example, the competency D2 emphasize more on inclusion and diversity now. So that's something to really look into. And also, should I mention, our fantastic team from AFB was actually involved in inputting into this edition as well. So yeah, Team AFB. Now, final question before we go into the Q&A. Since you guys got chartered, what's changed? As the pocket got bigger, as the bank accounts changed? We'll start with you, Yasmin.
Not immediately. So I was at a different job, and it didn't really make too much difference that I had become chartered. I think it helps depending on what job you have. So I know if you work for an engineering consultancy, they do value chartership quite a lot. So it depends, but I did it more for myself. So I was quite proud of achieving chartership. So it's more of a personal achievement for me.
Thanks very much. And you, Ozak, we got 2 minutes till the Q&A.
Not much changed. I was really hoping for that payday, but hey, we'll keep waiting.
But some companies do give money though.
No, it was a personal goal. So I felt very fulfilled and satisfied with myself. But ideally, it should be a salary increase and promotion. Not necessarily promotion, but salary increase. In my previous role, when I started applying, it's a promotion and a salary. That was a given. But no, I feel very proud of achieving it. And then now, because I have it, I'm able to take on more roles or take on more responsibility within the company. So eventually it will happen.
Yeah, happen. Because I know some companies give out
There's
a little change.
Yeah.
Yes, a little change.
My last job, there was a bonus of quite a few.
Yeah,
for achieving.
Thanks very much. And Sadiq, what's changed?
I compliment myself with saying that it was definitely a personal achievement. So even if they didn't give me any more money, I was very proud of myself for achieving it. I think depending on how your company reacts to or how much they value chartership will determine kind of whatever the changes may be. So if they really, really, like, so for example, WSP, they do give you a bonus if you achieve chartership, and then often there's a compensation after that in terms of promotion and increase in payments. So, and if they don't give you the kind of feedback you want, then obviously then that's for you to also assess it and make a move from there. So.
Thanks very much. And finally, Roshni, I know you moved from ACOM to a different company. Something must have changed.
So I applied for chartership as soon as I moved to my new company. So it's not like, so I didn't get much of a salary change either, but they did give me like a voucher for a fancy meal for two. So that was nice of them. And I had a huge party to celebrate. But I think a lot of companies like in the construction industry require chartership for you to progress to senior engineer level. So yeah, so some companies give you a promotion and you get a bonus.
Don't really worry about it. Okay, thanks very much, guys. We'll now move into Q&A. I see a lot of people have been asking a lot of questions. Let me try get some of them out. Okay. Someone asked the question. I'm just going to put it out to the crowd. What are the chances for a newcomer, a new engineer in the UK, to get chartered? Does let's say an overseas standard, or does it impact the British standard in a way of being chartered? Zach?
Yeah. That's an interesting one. I'd say the most times is around the qualifications. So check with the institution. A lot of them have like emails on teams who are dedicated to supporting people with chartership. They are staff of the institution, so they're not even like volunteers or anything. They're paid to do that. I would say reach out to them. Most people who move from countries, the biggest sticking point is usually the qualifications. So what does that translate to with the UK model that they have? And they have that already. So I would say, first of all, contact the institution you are looking to get chartered with. I do know the IET, they would have various conversions from Europe, if you come from Nigeria, where they have a chart of where that sits with their own requirements. Yeah, so I think that's the best place to get the answer from. If you have experience, it's still very valid. If anything, it makes you more international. It shows that you have an ability to work abroad, and now you've moved to the UK, you have an ability to also contribute here to projects as well. So that I'm assuming that you were working somewhere else before and you've moved to the UK. So if anything, it adds a new dynamic to your application as well. And it makes you stand out. It shows you've worked with diverse teams. So working with people not in the UK and working with people outside of the UK. So if anything, it adds flavor to your application. But yeah, certainly before you actually start applying, I recommend that you contact your institution so that you get clarification on the qualifications and see if there's anything you need to do to either adjust that or if it's a straight case of going ahead with it.
So I'll give the chance. This person's raised their hand up like 3 times now. Faust, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Raised their hand up.
Yeah, hi, my name's Fadil.
Fadil, yeah.
Yeah, I had a question for Dr. Ozak. I think a couple of other people have actually asked some questions before me, but I'll just go for it. The question was regarding the PhD, because I noticed when she was talking about her application and the interview, she mentioned that, so I'm also doing my PhD at the moment, and I wondered how the institutions view the PhD. Do they count it as experience? Because doctoral researchers have a dual status as students and staff in a sense, or is a PhD just viewed as education? So how is that something which they see as you being able to use against the competencies, not just A and B, but also some of the other ones like C and D as well?
Yeah, so I would say that yes and no. So under my education, I had my undergraduate and my PhD written there. But as experience, so competency A, which I said before, it's around knowledge and understanding. And so in that, if you read the example, I just posted a link literally just now, if you go to the examples of evidence, so that most of the document on the Engineering Council tells you the competence and it tells you the sort of examples they expect to see. So in competency A, you'd see quite a lot of things about contribution to new knowledge, which is where research literally sits, basically. So for most of those examples, competency A, I used just my PhD, really. So because it fit the bill to a T better than I would have with other project experience in industry. Not saying that there was no innovation and stuff we're doing, there was, but the research element just ticked that box. I didn't feel the need to use other projects for that. I would say that you can't, I won't say you can't, but for some of the other competencies, when you, and that's why it's good to kind of like do the initial development process, the initial professional development process, because it identifies gaps. So for me, when I did that, I realized I was lacking a lot in the application of research. So there's one thing to just be doing research and it's being chalked out, and you need to be able to demonstrate the application. And I struggled with that because after my PhD, I didn't really apply the stuff that I developed for that PhD to anything. So I couldn't write on the bit around competency B. So working in industry now as a graduate engineer, I had examples of places where I've designed and developed and solved their problems. But I would say it's a mix of both, and they encourage it. They really like people with research background. Not that it goes the other way either. Like every experience that adds or contributes to engineering is valued. It's how it's the best way to describe it, basically. So don't let that put you off. But I think a good place would be looking at also competency C's and D. So C, in industry, you'll be managing people. You'll be managing a budget. Are you currently managing a budget as part of your PhD? Most times, as just part of your PhD, no. But as a research associate or as a fellow, etc., you get to do those types of stuff. So if you do the initial assessment, you would see that there are some gaps there that just your PhD alone as a student is not enough, but it does add when you choose to. So another thing, it shortens the time, if I'm being honest. So I had only about 3.5 years industry experience to 4 years, but that those years just helped me fill in the other gaps that I had identified where I was weak in. But with my PhD alone, that kind of accelerated the process because I was able to confidently fill out all the examples for competency A. So it's definitely a bonus, and before I go around the circles, and if they do really encourage people from academia to also look at applying for chartership, because it adds to engineering. So engineering is academia, industry, and government together. So if you work in any of those strands and you're contributing to engineering, I think you might as well go for it. Yeah, I don't know if you have any follow-on questions.
Thanks, Vincent. I think that there's a lot of questions to go through as well. So if you want to ask Oza a question, you could add it on LinkedIn. She's quite approachable. Go send her messages. Another question we've gotten from someone, Roshni, I'll leave this to you, is do all your experiences on competency have to be engineering and STEM related?
No, so your actual engineering stuff is competencies A and B. And those are your technical ones. C is all management. D is communication. So no, did I answer the question?
No, you done it away. Thanks very much.
So no, they're not all STEM related. I think there's a lot of management, leadership, and communication. As an engineer as well.
Thanks very much. And Sadiq, you might be able to help out on this. Someone's asked a question around iStruct. I know I've heard stories about if you think ICE is level 8 odd, apparently iStruct is the next level really. Are you able to give us an insight? I don't know if you have any knowledge regarding iStruct.
Yeah, definitely heard some horror stories about iStruct, but what I will say is that often people forget that before you actually go and do your professional review, there's a number of stages that will certify that you're actually at the level to do it. So they're not going to just throw you there if they don't. Your mentor or your sponsors actually feel like you're at that level. So you will feel confident to some degree that you are actually at the right level to do the professional review. So it's, in as much as people may have said that, those people are often either at the level or just around it. So it's never that you're so far off or miles away from actually being able to qualify as a chartered engineer with iStruct. So.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm just going through a couple of more questions. I think that there's a question regarding the number of years of experience that's needed. Yasmin, is it something you're able to discuss on? Is there a specific duration after university to go for it, or is it as long as you experience enough, you're old enough in a way?
Yeah, I think I think they tend to say kind of like 4 to 5 years, but it depends what you've been doing. Yeah, it can take less time or longer. But yeah, I think around 4 or 5 years is a good guideline.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much. Let's just go through more questions, guys. Sorry, there's a lot of questions coming my way. I think there's a question regarding preference as well, regarding what institute should I go for, and how am I going to know which one is best suited for me in my career. In terms of you guys, did you get any sort of sit down with anyone from work that said to you, IET is better for you? Because I know a lot of jobs nowadays, you might get people that could either go for IMechE or IET, regardless of your job role.
So something I'd say is Chartership, professional registration, is actually independent of those institutions. It's from the council. It's from the engineering council. It's the same body for all those groups which you showed on your slides. Now, people choose depending on, because some institutions are affiliated. So examples would be ICE and ISTRUE. And so for civil engineers and structural engineers, you would go through those. IET, initially when they started, they were just for electrical engineers and electronics engineers. They've expanded, they're for everybody now, even people in tech as well, and people in mechanical, people in aero. IET is open to all. IMechE, similar as well, I would say, because I have friends who did their first degree as electrical engineers, have gone on to work in the oil and gas sector, and have come back to apply, and they didn't want to go through IET, and they wanted to go through IMechE. It's all down to you and your preference. You could have a look at the different institutions' websites and see what they say. But for most of it, it's very fluid, I'd say. I chose the IET because I was a member as a student, and I had received support and resources throughout the process. It just made sense to stick. I had a point where I was thinking of going with CIBSE. CIBSE is the Chartered Institute for Building Services Engineers, because at the time I was working as a building services engineer. And so I thought maybe I think the main reason why people consider that is the interview process. So how knowledgeable would they be about your subject matter when you go into the interview, so that the kind of questions that they ask and stuff like that. But I thought for electricity is always electricity, so I just went with the IET because I was already a member of the IET, and their process I was very familiar with it. But it's up to you to shop around, and because you become a member, first of all, of that institution before you arrive at CEng. It's not the other way around, where you get your CEng and then you become a member. So what does membership of that organization offer you as a person? Then decide which institution works best for you and apply for CEng that way, is what I would say.
I just found out relatively recently that you can move your chartership as well. So I'm chartered with the IEng, but if I want, I can transfer that to the IET. So that's possible if I wanted to do that later on.
Yes. Following another question for you, Yasmin. Someone said, I have a BSc in chemical engineering with 7 years of experience. Should I apply for CEng or IEng? What do you suggest?
I don't know what IEng. Does anyone know?
Incorporated engineer?
Incorporated, yeah. So it's a step before CEng. So sometimes some institutions advise people to go for an IEng first. If you're not sure. So IEng is more a practitioner, CEng is more a manager. So you're now responsible for processes. So most people like to go the IEng route first before they go on to the CEng route, and some just stay on the IEng. It's all preference, but I'll let you answer the question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I would say talk to the membership team at the IEng so that those guys know which route would be best for you, because it depends where you did your degree, what kind of experience you have, there's a whole bunch of factors that I don't know the ins and outs of it, but they'll be able to advise better than I can.
Thanks very much. People are asking regarding someone helping them with the AFBE. If you do want, I will be giving the contact after this slide. If you want any help, feel free to email us AFBE, and also feel free to add Roshni, Ozak, Sadiq, and Yasmin on LinkedIn. You know, I'm quite a straightforward person. I just message people on LinkedIn in a way. But you know, just be, you know, they're approachable people. If you need any help, I'm sure they will definitely be willing to help you out. Someone said, does this count as CPD? Yes, he does. Okay, someone's just sent a message to Roshni. Okay, so she said, Kelly said, what if my job isn't necessarily typical mechanical engineering job? I control system engineering. Would IMechE not recognize this type of work? Does it matter if my type of work is not design or CFD or FEA based?
I think it would be open. They would be open to it because I don't have a typical mechanical engineering role either. So I work as a fire engineer. I did a few years as a CFD engineer purely. So that helped me tick my A and B competencies. Well, most of my A competencies. And then as a fire engineer, I got managed to tick the C's and the B's. So I think they would be open to it. I think the best thing to do is probably email membership at the IMechE and tell them what your actual role is, and they would be able to offer advice. The IMechE also, if you go to like the local IMechE page, they run workshops as well with people in membership, so you could have like one-on-one discussions with them about your application.
Thanks very much. Another question. Oh, I like ambitious people. Someone said, is there ever a need to double chartership?
No, I was literally typing something about that just now. That
Yeah.
you know, chartership is once, and except I don't know, it expires or something, but typically it's once. But you can have membership of several. So you see some people's name with MIT, MCBC, FI. The difference is that you would have to be paying membership to each of those institutions for those various type like membership numbers. But the one CEng is a one-time thing. I think, except you have left it for several years. Maybe you stop paying your fees or something, and then maybe you need to upskill. Then maybe, but I've never heard CEng is. I've never heard of double CEng before. I could be wrong.
Good question, actually. Someone said, is the chartership recognized globally? So if I take my my IET CEng, if I go to a place like let's say Australia or America, would I have a problem?
I could speak for Nigeria. CEng is definitely valued or definitely important. We have our own local council for registration in the country. So if you've done it abroad, it's just a conversion basically you would do. You not need to do any exams or anything again. So it is recognized in quite a lot of countries, I would say. Canada definitely, because I know the IET's council, we do have members from Canada. So yes, CEng is recognized over there as well. Australia, I'd have to check, I'm not sure, but yeah, I know Middle East definitely. So if I want to take a job in Dubai or something, it adds value, and I could actually come in pitching for salaries around that level as well. But I'm not sure of every country. You'd have to check. So I think it's most countries where British standard applies. So at least that's how I view it for electrical. So we use British standards in Nigeria for both education and even just wiring regs, for example. So it would apply. The conversions would definitely apply. But check for Australia. I'm not sure. Actually, it should be because it's a British colony, but I don't know.
Thanks very much. Okay, I worked within the maintenance industry for 10 years and recently completed my MEng. How do I apply for CEng? I think someone's answered it before, but probably worth repeating. Okay, I would say. So yeah, basically you could just, Sadiq, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say it depends on the institute you want to apply to, firstly, and what you've studied and which one best is applicable for it. So I think it's probably best to maybe speak to a supervisor or someone you work with who's more senior, and they can guide you in terms of what institute to go on, because the application will vary depending on what institute it is. So.
Okay, thanks very much. I think a question we got from the last members about chartership was, what if I was self-employed? How can I fairly assess myself as an engineer?
I guess if you're self-employed, you're doing work for other companies. So maybe you can ask clients to sign off on work that you've done. That's the way around it I can think of.
Okay, thanks very much. I see, I'll give a chance to Shay to raise the band.
Sorry, my question, I just wanted to clarify about the double chartership, but I think it's been answered. And the reason I was asking is because the IEng seems to be something that's relatively different for systems engineers, which is the career path that I want to go down. So I was just wondering, because certification doesn't seem to, from what I've research I've done, doesn't seem to equate to chartership. So is there any point in doing both, was what I was trying to clarify.
I can help with that. Hi, it's Fadil here. I'm a member of IEng as well. I've also been a member of the IET. And in fact, I almost submitted my application to the IET, but I was having trouble with some of the competencies because I've been practicing as a systems engineer. And recently, IEng joined the Engineering Council, and they've been holding webinars. We can connect after this to actually take you through the process of how you get registered with IEng. Now, CCEP or certification and CEng are actually quite different. There is no relationship between the two. This was explained by the head of IEng UK. In some ways, CCEP has a narrower scope because it doesn't really ask about ethics, it doesn't ask about leadership, doesn't ask about communication, management. It's purely about systems engineering tasks. So if, for example, someone was a requirements engineer and just spent 5 years doing that and maybe did a couple of other things within systems engineering like verification, validation, or architecture, they could document that work against the requirements for CCEP, and they would get that CCEP just like that once they've done their exam. Whereas for chartership, you need to demonstrate the knowledge, but you also need to demonstrate the wider engineering know-how, as everyone has addressed today. So my plan is to actually go with IEng and get chartered through IEng. That would mean everything that has been discussed today by Ozak, Sadiq, Roshni, Yasmin, all of that would be applicable. And then I also intend to do the certification as well. So they're actually two different things, and we can talk about this offline if you want.
Thanks very much for that insight. The next question, we'll take 2 or 3 more questions, is how does CEng, this is actually a good question, how does CEng help you progress into a career management? Because I know is it APM for, you know, does CEng really mean anything in the project management industry? I feel I blew everyone away. All right, Sadiq.
Yeah, I'd say that I think obviously as part of the competencies, management and leadership is one of them. That's a fundamental element of.
If you could get closer, please. It's a bit low. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll say that it's fundamental. I think it's a fundamental element of the competencies. So leadership and management is essential. So if you want to go for a position which requires you to manage or lead a team, you would have had to have shown evidence of that and your ability to do it in trying to achieve chartership. So it is definitely something that will sort of help guide you towards a position of management. It's not seen as just something that's technical or has to do with people maybe in doing sort of design or anything. It spans outside of that. For me, I work as a project manager and engineering manager, and that role for me is much more management actually at the moment than it is anything technical. So definitely does guide you towards that as well if you want to go that way.
Thanks very much. And the final question we'll go into, there's a lot of questions, shall I say, regarding the duration from the start to the end. I think with the IET, Ozak, correct me if I'm wrong, is it 20 weeks or something, or I can't remember.
Yeah, they give a really high estimate because some people, I think they give, yeah, something like that. I'm not sure. But most people 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Oh, do you mean like from the application from the start?
But it is, how many years do you need to work before you apply?
Oh, how many years? So
Yeah.
I don't like this years question.
Yeah.
I think that CEng is or IEng or IEng tech or ICT tech, it's a personal decision. It could be personal, it could be professional. So sometimes some employers would say you can't move to the next step if you don't have this. I know I couldn't become a senior engineer at my last job if I wasn't chartered. So except that's the scenario. If it's a personal thing, I'd say always, I'm a firm believer in taking it in your own stride. And so typically they say 5 years from when you start on the graduate program, and you can then apply. So 5 years from when you graduate and have worked for 5 years, basically, you can apply for CEng. But some people have worked 10 years. It wasn't a thing they wanted. Now it's a thing they want. Go for it. But typically, I would say, yeah, 5 years. Don't wait till the 5 years. If you start working on it very early in your first year of your graduate program and you're already tracking your competencies, you know where your gaps are and you're filling them along the way as you're going. Whenever you feel ready, even if it's not 5 years and you feel confident, just go for it if it's 3 years. But for me, I'd say 5 years and above, you could go for CEng. And there are steps as well. So maybe after 3 years, you don't want to go all the way for CEng. IEng is a good way to go. So it's I have a friend who got IEng first, and then so in the 3 years he started working from graduating university, and then 2 years later he went for CEng. But it's the same thing as somebody just doing it once, because you do that interview process twice. You first get IEng, and then you do another interview to get CEng. But because you already have IEng, the chances of you coming out of a CEng are almost set, because you're almost likely to get it. Whereas if you're going straight through for CEng, it could be either way, but even if you're unsuccessful, you still get the chance to go again. So it's up to you to decide how long before you apply.
Thanks very much.
I think the question.
No, it does. Thanks. We'll finish the session with one last sentence. We'll start with you, Yasmin, for anyone that's sort of hesitating, should I go for it? Should I not go for it?
Yeah, there's no reason to hesitate. I think get in touch with your institution, find out what you need to do, and don't think of it like an exam. It's more of a process.
Thanks very much. And Sadiq? You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah. For me, I knew that as soon as I started as a professional after uni, I wanted to get chartered. So if you make that decision, just know that the process starts from there, because that's when you start sort of documenting all your experience. And for me, I did it in just in 4 years. And the reason why I was able to do it in that time was because I started from the moment when I said I wanted to do it. So once you start documenting, and then from there you'll find that you'll stay committed to the whole process, and you'll be chartered before you know it. So.
Thanks very much. And Roshni?
Yeah, I definitely say go for it. It took me longer to apply for it, but just because I thought I didn't meet the competencies. But when I actually went back and read it, I could have applied for it about a year and a half before I actually did. And it's becoming more and more important for at least the construction industry, for engineers to demonstrate their competence. And it's important for businesses to have chartered engineers on. So yeah, definitely.
Thanks very much. And quick one, Ozak, before we run out of time.
Yeah, what everyone said basically. Yeah, just
go for it.
Thanks
very much. I'm going to end the conversation today. One of my favorite quotes, really. There's 3 types of people in this life. The people who make it happen, people who watch it happen, and people who wonder what just happened. Now, don't be that third person that's watching everyone get chartered and not actually making an effort yourself. So I would encourage everyone to make things happen. To contact AFBE, you could find us on Twitter. AFBE-UK, same for LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or you could send us an email, info@afbe.gov.uk. Check our website as well. I must emphasize on saying something. We are doing the funding for Making an Engineer Art campaign. It's for a good cause, really, helping kids from different schools, so definitely go on our LinkedIn page and every penny matters, like Tesco says. You know, every contributor does go a certain way. But yeah, it's been a fantastic event. Really, I've had good fun. Thank you again, guys, for dedicating a couple of hours, shall I say, to help us with this event. Hopefully, we could have you here again another time. So thanks, everyone.